Ethan, a 10-year-old boy, is battling a rare and aggressive form of bone cancer called osteosarcoma. Doctors have informed his family that although the disease was diagnosed early, the treatment process will be long, difficult, and expensive. Ethan's family is struggling to cover the costs. His father is unable to work due to an injury from a work accident, and his mother works 2 jobs to support the family. Despite this, Ethan's chemotherapy, medication, and hospital expenses are more than they can afford. Ethan has not given up on his dreams. He hopes to recover and continue drawing to tell his story and inspire others. One day, Ethan and his mother are sitting on a bench outside the hospital when they notice Dwayne, "The Rock" Johnson, relaxing in the park. The Rock notices Ethan's weak but hopeful gaze and approaches him. Ethan recognizes him immediately and excitedly asks, "Are you The Rock?" Ethan shares his story and his dream of recovery during a brief conversation. The Rock is deeply moved by Ethan's dreams and struggle and decides to help Ethan and his family. The Rock takes on Ethan's chemotherapy and surgery expenses, ensuring Ethan receives treatment from the best specialists in the country. The treatment process is both physically and emotionally challenging, but Ethan perseveres with the support of his family and The Rock. Months later, the treatment is complete, and the doctors declare Ethan cancer-free. Ethan and The Rock become close friends after this journey. Inspired by Ethan's determination, The Rock helps establish the Light of Life Foundation to support children battling life-threatening illnesses. Ethan's artwork becomes the face of the foundation, and his story inspires people worldwide. Ethan is now a healthy teenager, pursuing his dreams through art, while The Rock continues to work with the foundation, changing the lives of many children. The story concludes with a message. Ethan's story reminds us all that even a small act of kindness can make a big difference. Each of us can be someone's hero. Be part of this change. If you are satisfied with this translation and want to turn it into a YouTube script, just let me know. On a hot summer day in Santa Clarita, California, a quiet suburban street hummed with a steady rhythm. Lawns were neatly trimmed, sprinklers ticked rhythmically, and the scent of freshly cut grass mingled with a faint hint of barbecue wafting from a few houses down. But for one little girl, this was no ordinary summer day. 7-year-old Emma carefully arranged her lemonade stand, perched on a small wooden stool that barely allowed her feet to touch the ground. It was a simple setup: a folding table covered with a faded checkered cloth, a sweating pitcher of lemonade, and a neat stack of small plastic cups off to the side. The centerpiece was a handmade sign, crafted with thick, uneven letters slid across a burst of color. It read, "Lemonade for Hope." Emma's determination was evident in every detail, from the careful adjustment of her sign to the bright smile she flashed at every passing car. Emma's purpose set her apart from other children. She wasn't saving up for a new toy or a trip to the amusement park. She was raising money for her own chemotherapy treatments. No child should have to make such a choice, but Emma had faced more in her 7 years than most people do in a lifetime. About a year ago, she was diagnosed with leukemia. She had spent countless days in hospitals, undergoing tests. Needles and treatments left her weak and nauseous, but she refused to let the disease darken her spirit. Emma's mother, Claire, watched from the porch, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and sorrow. Emma's once long, golden hair was now short, a consequence of her treatments. But there she was, waving enthusiastically at every passerby, her large brown eyes shining with a resolve beyond her years. A jogger passed by, glanced at the stand with curiosity, then waved and continued on. That a car slowed briefly before driving away. Emma seemed undeterred, simply adjusting her sign and pouring herself a small cup of lemonade to sip while she waited. Her first customer was Mrs. Henderson, who approached with her cane. "How much for a cup?" she asked, her voice warm. Emma replied with a whisper, and Mrs. Henderson handed her a $10 bill. "Keep the change," she said softly, her eyes lingering on the word hope. Emma's hand trembled slightly as she took the money, and she watched Mrs. Henderson slowly make her way back home. Some people bought lemonade, while others simply dropped a few coins or bills into the jar labeled donations. Each interaction brought a new wave of courage. But as the day wore on, it became clear that Emma's goal was still far from being realized. Yet, Emma did not lose hope. Today could be the day everything changed. The day someone extraordinary would enter her life and transform her little stand into a beacon of hope. Emma's journey had begun in the most unexpected way. She had always been the picture of health. She spent her days running barefoot in the garden, climbing trees, and riding her pink bike with streamers flying from the handlebars. She was a lively little girl who filled the room with laughter, her imagination boundless as she sketched whimsical scenes on scraps of paper. But about a year ago, everything changed. IT started with fatigue, so severe she couldn't finish her bike rides. She began napping after school and developed small bruises that seemed to come from nowhere. Her parents thought it was just a phase. Maybe she was just growing up. The fever started low and then spiked, refusing to break. Emma's appetite waned, and she began losing weight at an alarming rate. One day, Claire noticed Emma struggling to lift her art supplies. That's when she knew something was seriously wrong. Claire and Brian took Emma to the pediatrician. They braced themselves for the worst. The waiting room had a faint antiseptic smell, and the cheerful posters on the walls did little to ease Claire's growing anxiety. After a series of tests, blood draws, and an agonizing wait, the doctor entered the room with a look that confirmed their fears. "Emma has leukemia," he said gently, as if softer words could somehow blunt the impact. Claire's world tilted. The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. She reached for Brian's hand, her mind racing with questions and fears. What did this mean for Emma? How bad was it? Could they afford the treatments? Emma didn't fully grasp the severity of the diagnosis at first, but she sensed something was wrong. Her parents explained it to her in simple terms, assuring her they would do everything to make her better. But as the weeks passed, the hospital became her second home. Familiar nurses' faces, chemotherapy sessions, and harsh treatments that wore down her little body. Claire stayed by her side throughout it all, holding her hand when she cried in pain, whispering reassurances when she was at her lowest, and trying to maintain strength even as the stress etched lines on her face. Emma, despite it all, never lost the fire within her, finding joy in small things. A nurse's silly joke, a coloring book brought by a visitor, the comforting weight of her favorite blanket, or sitting on the living room floor coloring while her parents talked softly in the kitchen. One evening, Emma looked at her mother and asked, "Is there something I can do to help?" Claire knelt beside her, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear, brushing away the faint sweat from her forehead. "What do you mean, sweetheart? What if I sell lemonade?" Emma said, her voice holding that innocent simplicity only a child could possess. Claire's throat tightened. The purity of Emma's idea was both heartbreaking and beautiful. She pulled her daughter into a hug, her voice trembling. "That's a wonderful idea, sweetie." The next day, they got to work. Emma designed the sign, and Claire gathered the supplies. Every detail reflected Emma's resolve, from the bright colors and thick letters to the careful attention she gave to each aspect, believing wholeheartedly that her small act could make a big difference. Unaware that her little stand would bring her community together in ways she never imagined, the following Saturday morning, Emma's lemonade stand dream became a reality. The sun rose early, casting long shadows across the neighborhood as Claire helped Emma set up in their driveway. Emma wore her favorite yellow sundress, which she insisted matched the lemonade, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded her face. Though the treatments had left her pale and tired, the excitement brought a pink flush to her cheeks. They carried the folding table and covered it with a checkered cloth Claire found in a storage box. And the pitcher of lemonade freshly made that morning sat prominently in the center. She stood proudly behind her stand, the jar labeled donations beside her and a neat stack of plastic cups. The words on her sign were carefully written in her slightly shaky but determined handwriting. Her favorite part was the sign. She had worked on it all week, painstakingly writing "Lemonade for Hope" with thick, colorful letters. Below it, she drew a bright yellow sun and a red heart with the same childlike imperfection that made it endearing. They placed it on an old easel in front of the stand. The first hour was quiet. A jogger waved, but didn't stop. A car slowed as it approached, the driver looking curiously before driving on. Emma seemed undeterred, adjusting her hat and pouring herself a small cup of lemonade to sip while she waited. By mid-morning, her first customer arrived. "Mrs. Henderson, An elderly woman who lived 2 houses down approached with her cane. "Good morning, Emma," she said warmly. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson," Emma replied, her face brightening. "Would you like some lemonade? How much per cup?" $1. Mrs. Henderson smiled and pulled a $10 bill from her purse. "I'll have some, dear. Keep the change. Is that okay?" Emma asked, her hands trembling slightly as she handed her a cup. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. Mrs. Henderson smiled and walked away, and more neighbors began to arrive that a young mother pushing a stroller stopped to buy a cup. Then a group of kids from Emma's school arrived, bringing energy and laughter as they chatted and bought lemonade, asking if the sign was for her chemotherapy. Emma explained simply and honestly, and most customers ended up dropping an extra bill into the donation jar. Word spread quickly, and by lunchtime, people were stopping by to buy lemonade and chat with Claire, who was now sitting in a garden chair nearby. The scent of freshly cut grass and the sound of children's laughter filled the air, but all eyes were on Emma's stand. Emma's day took an unexpected turn when the local mailman, Mr. Alvarez, approached with his usual friendly smile. He asked how much a cup was, and Emma replied, $1. He handed her the money, and she poured him a cup. Mr. Alvarez took a sip, smacked his lips, and said it was the best lemonade he'd ever had. Then he handed her $20. "Keep up the good work, kid." Emma laughed, feeling for the first time in months like more than just a sick girl. Like she was making a difference one cup at a time. The crowd grew throughout the day, and by early afternoon, the donation jar was nearly full. Claire watched her daughter's interactions with a mix of pride and emotion, her confidence growing with each kind word and gesture. The day felt like a victory, but Emma had no idea what was about to happen then. Someone unexpected arrived, and everything changed. The sun was high in the sky, casting sharp shadows across the neighborhood. Emma was pouring herself another cup of lemonade, the donation jar nearly bursting with crumpled bills and loose change glinting in the afternoon light. The air hummed with a quiet energy. Neighbors came and went, each adding their small contribution to Emma's stand. Emma seemed unfazed by the heat, adjusting her wide-brimmed hat and gripping the pitcher tightly with her small hands. Claire watched proudly from a garden chair, chatting with a neighbor, but keeping one eye on her daughter. Then something caught Emma's attention. Down the street, a tall man in a worn leather jacket and dark pants walked slowly toward the stand. His movements were deliberate, his posture relaxed but confident. Sunglasses hid his eyes, and a slight shadow partially concealed his weathered face. He carried an air of quiet confidence that turned a few heads. Emma squinted, looking at him curiously, that he wasn't familiar, not one of the regular joggers or neighbors who passed by. He stopped a few steps from the stand and examined the setup with a slight smile, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Hi there, Emma," he said cheerfully, his voice cutting through the street's quiet hum. "Would you like some lemonade? It's just $1 per cup." The man chuckled softly, bending slightly to meet her gaze. $1, huh? Sounds like a bargain." His voice was deep and gravelly. "What's all this for, anyway?" Emma pointed to her sign, her small finger tracing the words, "Lemonade for Hope." "This is for my chemotherapy," she explained simply. Her tone was matter-of-fact, but underscored with a quiet strength. "I'm trying to help my mom and dad, so they don't have to worry too much." The man's expression softened. He looked at the donation jar, then back at Emma. For a moment, he hesitated, as if weighing his next move. Finally, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, poising his pen over the paper. Emma looked up at him, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Emma," she replied. He scribbled something on the check, then tore it out and handed it to her. Emma unfolded the paper, her small hands trembling slightly as she read the number written on it. Her eyes widened, and her mouth fell open. This is /50000, she exclaimed, her voice barely above a whisper. Claire watched from a distance, her heart racing. She stood up, her voice trembling with disbelief. //50,000 exclamation point, she repeated, rushing to Emma's side. She looked at the man, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say. This is too much." The man smiled, his stern features softening. "It's already yours, little one," he replied. "You did the real work here." Then, a voice murmured from the crowd, "Wait a minute. Is that Clint Eastwood?" The name rippled through the small group like a spark igniting dry leaves. Phones buzzed, and whispers turned to hushed voices. Within moments, everyone was craning their necks to get a better look. Emma looked at him curiously. "Are you famous or something?" she asked, tilting her head. Clint chuckled, bending slightly to look at her more closely. His tone was light, but held none of the arrogance one might expect from someone so famous. Emma laughed softly, and the crowd joined in, the moment's tension dissolving into something warm and intimate. Clint reached out and gently patted Emma's shoulder. "Keep doing what you're doing, kid. The world needs more people like you." The donation jar was full, the check was written, and yet the encounter was far from over. Clint Eastwood, the legendary actor and filmmaker, stood before Emma's little lemonade stand, his presence sending ripples of excitement through the gathered crowd. Word spread quickly, and the legendary actor and filmmaker Clint Eastwood was standing in front of Emma's little lemonade stand. The words rippled through the gathering crowd, and people began to whisper excitedly, some discreetly taking photos or videos, but Clint seemed unfazed. His focus was solely on Emma and her family. Emma looked at the check, the thick number written on it almost too much to comprehend, /50000. She murmured, her voice trembling with disbelief and awe. Claire rushed to her daughter's side, her hands trembling as she gently took the check, her eyes confirming what she had heard, her breath catching as tears streamed down her cheeks. "This is incredible," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't believe it." Clint smiled softly, his weathered face radiating a quiet kindness. "It's not about the money," he said, his voice steady, wanting to show this little fighter that she was not alone, that the hard part was already done, that she just needed a little boost. As if on cue, the crowd began to applaud, inspired by the gesture they had just witnessed. The local mailman, Mr. Alvarez, was the first to speak up. "Emma," he said, pulling a /50 bill from his wallet. "I think Clint's got the right idea. Let's make sure you get everything you need." One by one, people reached into their pockets and wallets, pulling out whatever they had. Some handed over $20 bills, others dropped crumpled fives and ones into the already overflowing donation jar, and a few even offered checks written on the spot. Emma's stand, which had started the day with a modest goal, had become the center of something extraordinary. Claire struggled to hold back tears as she thanked each person who stepped forward, her heart swelling with gratitude. Emma stood behind her lemonade table, her face shining with a mix of gratitude and awe. "Does this mean I don't have to sell lemonade anymore?" she asked shyly, a soft laugh escaping her lips. All eyes turned back to Clint. Clint chuckled, his deep, woody laugh resonating through the crowd. "You don't have to joke," he said, bending slightly to meet her gaze again. "But something tells me you'll keep finding ways to brighten the world a bit more. That's all you." That moment crackled with a rare and precious hope. Then, a voice called out from the crowd, "Group photo." And within moments, the neighbors gathered around. Emma and Clint stood in the center, surrounded by a wide, smiling group, captured by a local photographer. The photo later went viral, becoming a symbol of how one small act of kindness could inspire an entire community. By the end of the day, the total donations, excluding Clint's check, had surpassed $10,000. Emma's modest lemonade stand had transformed into a beacon of generosity, touching the hearts of everyone who passed by. But as the crowd began to disperse, Clint was not yet finished. He leaned toward Claire and said softly, "I have a few friends who want to help." In the days that followed, they received calls from unexpected sources, each offering support in their own way. Claire could only shake her head, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Thank you. You've changed our lives." Clint tipped an imaginary hat to her and addressed the lingering small crowd. "You've got a special girl here," he said. "Take care of her and keep taking care of each other." With that, he turned and walked away, his leather jacket glinting in the afternoon sun. The neighborhood watched as he disappeared down the street, the weight of what had just happened settling in their hearts, but the story was far from over. The ripple effect of Clint's generosity and the chain reaction it sparked would extend far beyond this small suburban street in the days following Clint Eastwood's unexpected visit. Emma's lemonade stand captured the heart of Santa Clarita, and photos and videos taken by neighbors and shared on social media quickly went viral. News outlets picked up the story, running headlines that celebrated the little girl with big dreams and Clint's generosity. That Emma's lemonade stand, with its bright sign and shining smile, touched hearts everywhere it was seen. Claire and Brian were taken aback by the sudden influx of attention. Strangers began arriving at their doorstep with donations, flowers, and cards for Emma. Their mailbox overflowed with envelopes, many containing checks and letters of encouragement. A handwritten note from a little boy in Kansas read, "Dear Emma, I saw your story and wanted to help. I don't have much money, but I hope this $2 makes a difference. You are so brave. Love, Charlie." Age 8. Emma was deeply moved. She carefully placed the note in a shoebox where she began collecting all the cards and letters she received, insisting to her mother that she wanted to keep them all. "These people are helping me," she said. "I want to remember them when I look through these letters one evening." But the story didn't just inspire individuals. It also caught the attention of local businesses and charities. A nearby hospital offered to cover any remaining medical expenses. Emma's family was even approached by a popular lemonade brand, which sent her a year's supply of product and a heartfelt note. "Emma, your courage reminds us of life's sweetness. Keep inspiring the world." Claire and Brian watched in awe as the bills that had once seemed insurmountable began to be paid off, one by one, by the generosity of strangers. That Clint's act of kindness had sparked a wave of giving that extended far beyond Emma's immediate community. Inspired by her story, other children began setting up their own lemonade stands, donating their earnings to local hospitals and cancer charities. A movement began to take shape on social media under the hashtag #HardLemonadeForHope. Stories poured in from across the country of children raising money for loved ones. Communities came together, and even celebrities stepped forward to make donations in Emma's name. Emma, one evening, sat on the living room floor with her parents, sorting through a pile of letters. She looked up and said, "Do you think we can help other kids like me? Perhaps we can do something even bigger." Her words sparked an idea with the extra funds they had raised. Claire and Brian helped Emma launch Lemonade for Hope, a foundation aimed at supporting families struggling with medical expenses. The foundation's mission was simple. No child should have to choose between fighting for their life and worrying about how to pay for it, and the foundation, which had started quietly, did not remain silent for long. Within weeks, donations began pouring in from around the world. Schools held lemonade stand fundraisers. Businesses pledged matching donations, and other communities, inspired by Emma's story, launched their own local initiatives. One day, Emma received a package from Clint Eastwood. Inside was a framed photo of the two of them at the lemonade stand and a handwritten note, "Keep fighting, kid. You're making the world a better place." Emma read the note aloud, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I want to make him proud," she said softly, clutching the note to her chest. What had started as a simple lemonade stand had become a movement, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness could grow into something extraordinary. But for Emma and her family, the journey was about more than just the generosity they received. It was also about what they could give back. Months after that unforgettable day, life looked a little different for Emma and her family. Claire and Brian's faces, once etched with constant worry, had softened with a sense of relief they hadn't felt in over a year. The crushing medical bills that had once hung over them were gone, thanks to the generosity of strangers and an iconic actor who had stepped in when they needed it most. Emma's health continued to improve, her treatments ongoing, but the financial burden lifted. The family could now focus on supporting Emma emotionally and physically. Emma's spirit remained as bright as ever, and her lemonade stand had become more than just a way to help her family. It had become a cherished memory for everyone involved that day. But the story didn't end there. Emma's hope for Lemonade Foundation grew faster than anyone had expected. What started as a small give-back initiative had become a nationwide movement. Schools across the country held lemonade stand fundraisers, teaching children the power of kindness. Businesses pledged matching donations, and families who had once struggled with medical bills began to find help through Emma's initiative. A little girl who once sat on a stool in her driveway had become an inspiration to thousands. She had become a symbol of resilience and compassion, proof that even the smallest voices could create ripples that reached far and wide. One day, at a local event celebrating the foundation's success, Emma stood on a small stage, her hands still trembling slightly, but her voice filled with newfound confidence. "Hi, everyone," she said, her young voice clear and determined. "I just want to say thank you. When I opened my lemonade stand, I only wanted to help my mom and dad. I didn't think many people would care, but you did, and now we can help other kids like me." Applause erupted, and Emma stepped away from the microphone as Claire pulled her into a tight hug, whispering, "You made me so proud." Most people didn't notice as a figure stood up from the back of the crowd. Clint Eastwood, dressed simply in a jacket and baseball cap, watched with a small smile. His hands were in his pockets, and he didn't need recognition or fanfare. He was there simply to celebrate the little girl who had turned a small act of kindness into a movement. As the event came to a close, a reporter asked Emma what she had learned from all this. She paused for a moment before replying simply but profoundly, "I learned that it doesn't matter how big or small you are. You can always do something to help, and amazing things can happen when people help each other." Her answer became a rallying cry for the foundation, a message that resonated with people everywhere. Stories of children inspired by Emma to start their own small acts of kindness began to pour in, from bake sales to car washes, all aimed at making the world a bit brighter. The family never forgot the day a man in a leather jacket stood before a little lemonade stand and saw the heart behind a simple sign, and as Emma's story continued to inspire, it served as a reminder to everyone that even in the darkest times, kindness and hope could light the way forward. If this story has touched you, take a moment to consider how you, no matter how small it may seem, can make a difference. Share this story, inspire someone else, and never forget that every act of kindness, big or small, can ripple out in ways you never imagined. And if you want to hear more stories like Emma's, full of hope, courage, and humanity, don't forget to subscribe for more.